whatsoever, and it goes to the middle of all objects in the universe, including all suns and all planets, and then all other, when you're on the planet, every other creature.
What a pulse.
Correct, with this pulse, 22 trillion times a second. Now, this is energy coming in, and at some point, because of the constraints in the middle of these various things that we call planets, the energy converts to matter. It would make sense to postulate that it would form itself not instantly as highly complex interactions of electrical fields, but as the more simple versions, which we mistakenly refer to as helium, hydrogen, and so on. So it may be that we're forming gas under pressure in a plasma environment, which is one of the definitions for fusion. And we're actually in the middle of our planet. We don't have a giant molten core of iron whizzing around because
never bought into that.
No, molten metal cannot hold a magnetic charge. It doesn't matter how big the thing is, right? And you can't generate a magnetic charge from molten metal as, quote, friction on the underside of the mantle. It just makes no sense whatsoever. But it could be, and especially look at where the storms are originating now and the earthquake activity on the planet, it makes a lot of sense that the hyperdimensional model of physics is correct. If that is the case, hyperdimensional physics supports the idea of a plasma expansion. So the Earth is actually growing in size. This may account for the...
Someone else raised that less eloquently on this program some years ago, that the Earth, the planet itself, was growing. And even if the poles were all to melt because of the growth of the planet, the oceans would never rise as much as people think.
I believe that to be the case. It's my understanding.
You follow that clearly, obviously, and
yeah, there are certain issues here with the idea of giant tsunamis and overcoming the total land masses and so on. Plus, you can factor in such strangeness as the idea of the homeostasis pressure of pumping blood up the neck of a brontosaurus, and the amount of gravity that would be required versus the amount of pressure that would be required under today's gravity. If, for instance, we had a brontosaurus here, they would die instantly because our current state of gravity and magnetic force, the amount of pressure required to pump blood up to their brain, however small, still needs blood, would be such that it would, no cellular structure, organic as we understand it, could withstand the internal pressure, and it would just blow itself to bits. So the postulate, therefore, is that at the time the dinosaurs existed, gravity was smaller. What could account for that? Well, a smaller planet. And a difference in the energetic activity that forms that smaller planet.
You could work on this for a PhD, huh?
No, then you're just an academic. The idea of peer review, letting the dumbest among us decide what should be published.
You're the last person who would play that game.
Exactly. I could barely stand school long enough. In my opinion, I'm sort of like Mark Twain, college education, no offense to anybody at all, in my opinion, is just demonstration that you can sit there and sit still while they spoon-feed you for 4 years.
Well, now more so than ever. And sit there while your parents pay for it. Or you go into debt for the rest of your life. Or
that won't be happening after 2009 is our supposition, at least as we understand it now. The whole college and university system is due to collapse as part of the general collapse of the economy. Because many of these institutions were idiots and invested all of their funds that were coming out during the boom period of the late 90s and the early 2000s into such things as hedge funds and Madoff's little scheme.
Got it. Very good. All right, when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Clif High about the financial catastrophe here and there and everywhere in just a few. Okay, and we're back with Clif High. And if you read the financial crisis featured story at Rense.com every day, you'll be kept up to date on what's happening around the world. It gets crazier. The ramifications of this are showing up all over the place now. China is the only one who seems to be doing well. China's GDP is supposedly up by 8%.
No, I'm sorry, I'd have to dispute that. China's in a world of hurt.
They're claiming 8% from the central bank there. Now, I don't know how they're measuring it, but the Chinese...
Hedonically, and that's the problem.
Is that it?
Learn their tricks from the Fed.
Thousands and thousands and thousands and tens of hundreds of are going back to the country farms because they've lost their jobs in the cities. We know that.
We also have 200 million that are basically unemployed or will be so at the end of the Chinese New Year with no place to go because the farms that they left don't exist anymore.
One job for every 1,000 applicants from a college master's degree, I read today somewhere.
Yeah, we have many contacts in China, and I correspond with a number of people from there, and the situation is quite dire. And They're in a particular situation that relates to that suggestion made by the Russian that's all over the internet that, oh yes, the United States is going to get flushed down the toilet and it's going to bust up into six parts.
I ran that weeks ago and just filed it, and then people got, this is really yen on behalf of a lot of people that hit the internet to believe in these utterly radically ridiculous projections.
But, you know, there we go back to that symbology again. To a certain extent, I believe that there's a number of initiatives out there which we call the memering to attempt to manipulate people's emotions and then allow them to fixate that emotion on whatever weirdness pops up. And the memering is actually intended to create the emotional imbalance that drives these individuals to fixate on these kinds of issues.
See, and what Clif is saying, and what many of you understand, is that this whole melodrama is being manipulated.
Scripted, yeah.
You got it.
And thus the issue of China trying to take over the west coast of the United States is absurd.
Please.
You know, their situation for the dollar is as bad as ours. And basically what's going to happen is that real soon the 100% realization at a gut level will begin to creep into the planetary populace, including the United States, as to how bad the financial condition really is. Real soon might be as early as February 14th, but certainly before the equinox in March 21. And by that time, we'll all be staring at some very significant changes that will be required for us all to happily coexist on this planet, or not. And let us be very clear about this. There's a whole group of nasty bastards out there that would rather have us not coexist peacefully.
Well, there's no profit in peaceful coexistence.
Well, your profit's going to go away.
Yeah.
Their power base doesn't necessarily require profit if it's structured right. Remember, profit per se didn't exist in the feudal system. It was a closed system cycle where they took as much as they could and still kept the populace relatively okay, and then up to a certain point, then they got a little bit greedy and it all fell to pieces. And we're seeing a repeat of that at this particular point. But the outcome, as you say, is not promising. My issue with the all of the symbology and everything coming out of the let's change direction. You know, we have change we can believe in. Let's return to the past. And you know, basically what they're saying is let's all try and live the Clinton years again when we had a boom. That is doomed to fail at some very fundamental levels because they're attempting to fix a system that is irreparable. And they're not willing to stand up and say, we're all hosed, we have to put all this stuff down and start over again and be rational about it. So instead, we're going to get the irrational outcome.
Which is to try to fix it.
Which is to continue to try to fix it repeatedly.
I've been saying that. You've been saying that. Very few have been saying that. It is broken and not rehabilitatable. You can't fix it. No chance.
There's just no way, and especially with the when you look at things from a Buckminster Fuller perspective and stay way out, 30,000 feet, 80,000 feet, whatever, so that you're seeing the planet as a whole and looking at it as a resource issue. We're in a situation right now where the planetary resources are consumed at the rate of about 40+% of the biota annually, and at 47% is the speculated breakdown point, at which case it doesn't replenish itself from one year to the next, and you start into a degrading spiral.
We're very close to that. How close are we to that?
Within years. If we were to have continued with predatory capitalism. Predatory capitalism appears to be dying. That can be expected to kill a number of people, perhaps tens of millions around the planet, as we can no longer afford to plow in on a profit-based system into a health care that extends life at the cost of the rest of the species. So we will soon see a die-off. I hate to say it this way, but
H5N1 fatality, 19-year-old female.
No. I'm not talking about anything like that. I'm not talking about pandemic or anything. I'm talking about the ability to provide.
This can't happen.
All of the various services that we have for all of those people that are heavily afflicted.
Well, ask the people in Europe trying to turn on their gas valves.
Yeah. And it's going to get very serious. And we've got minus 10-degree centigrade temperatures in England, and it's going to get worse.
It's cold or colder in England than it is in the Antarctic.
Which is not a good sign in itself. But basically we're in a very interesting period of time, and it's going to get a whole lot more interesting, and then we're also going to have this new and untried and perhaps illegal, who knows, administration taking over from the previous group of illegal criminals that were running things.
Well, they just put a new paint on the same old Same old MO, and it's eyewash. It's really disgusting.
That's why it's about time to start opting out. Really, the only option. And I'm one of those hundreds of millions that don't vote. I won't play the party game. It does not suit my life to put my emotion into their particular direction. So I'm doing everything I can to opt out of the existing financial and other systems that surround us. It's really the only rational approach in irrational times.
It is the only rational approach, correct. I feel great sorrow for those who are still suckered into the game and just can't see it. But that's the majority, and that's probably the way it's going to always be. It always has been. Now that they own 2 generations, they've got 2 full generations under their belts. The MTV generation, certainly the first, and then this
probably
latest...
3. The first, my generation would be the television generation, which also, I was fortunate. I was kicked out of the U.S. by circumstances, and so didn't have to grow up under those television and the degrading school system. But